Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS.
A heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best two ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
If you're sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome, everybody, into the Combat Sports Report here on SportsGrid. I am Brian Ciano. Thank you so much for joining us. That's right. We're growing. We're expanding. So we're hitting you with the rebranding. That's right. The Combat Sports Report now on SportsGrid, covering everything going on in the world of combat sports, talking to some of the biggest fights that we have going on. We're going to be talking BKFC still. Do not worry. We're going to be talking about that the whole second half of the show here today. We're going to break down that great card we just had in Marbella, Spain. Talk to Dave the Redneck Mundell after he defended his title, and find out what the Spain card was like for him, the trip, how he's doing, and what he wants next after defending that title once again. But we're going to expand, and we're going to grow, and we're going to add some more stuff into the mix. This week, particularly, we're going to be talking about the PFL, as they have a huge pay-per-view card coming up this weekend. Make sure you check that out in the U.S. on ESPN Plus or around the world on DAZN. And, of course, in Saudi Arabia, the PFL Super Fights, Battle of the Giants. It is going to be an awesome card. It is stacked. We're going to talk about the return of an absolute badass. We're going to continue to talk about some of these other fights that have some great fighters as well. We're going to break it down in just a minute. And then later on in the show, we're going to catch up with Ian Parker, PFL's betting analyst. Of course, you see him all over the place breaking down MMA. No one else better to talk about the great betting angle of getting involved with these fights this weekend, which of course is one of our favorite things to do here on SportsGrid. So we're going to break it all down with Ian Parker. We're going to talk about the main card. We're going to talk about maybe some other value or some other fighters to look at that aren't on that pay-per-view, that are a little further down, because we love finding value. We love finding winners here on SportsGrid, and no better way to do it than getting in it with a guy like Ian Parker. So we're going to talk to him next. Then, as I said, after that, later on the show, we'll break down what we saw down in out in Marbella, Spain, with the BKFC, their first ever card there. And we'll talk to Dave Mundell. But first, let's break down this card ourselves and talk about what we're going to see this weekend. Get involved. Go buy this pay-per-view. It is going to be awesome. It's going to be some great fights out in Saudi Arabia. Of course, 4 o'clock Eastern time. That'll be 1 o'clock Pacific time in the afternoon on Saturday. Make sure you check it out. I'm going to be locked in on this pay-per-view. Going to find a way. Got to send the family. I think they're going to the zoo. Boo the zoo. They can go without me. I'm going to sit home and watch this card. It's going to be stacked, and it starts at the top with a heavyweight title fight between the Predator, Francis Ngannou, and Renan Problema Ferreira. The first fight for, of course, Ngannou in years in MMA. But we're waiting for his return. He's been flirting with boxing. Had that fight against Tyson Fury, where he got the decision loss. Then got knocked down in the second round against Joshua. People were wondering what's going to be next. Is he going to continue with that? Is he going to come back to MMA? Finally does do that. Of course, coming to it with a heavy heart. Unfortunately, went through a terrible loss of his son earlier this year. After that Joshua fight, he talked about that, talked about how, he thought about quitting fighting, about when you get something like that that happens to you in your personal life. He just questioned everything. and thought about not fighting anymore, but now he's using it as motivation, as inspiration, and he's getting back into the cage here, fighting against Ferreira, the PFL heavyweight champ, the 34-year-old, 6'8" height. So a guy that's used to being, the biggest in Ngannou, no longer going to be that. He's going to be giving up about 4 inches to his opponent here. He has beat Gold Star for the title, defended against Bader in the PFL versus Bellator fight card. We saw recently after those two companies merged. He lost 3 in a row before that. That were then changed 2 of them to a no contest because of his opponents testing positive for things that were banned. But now is on a nice streak here as the champion, 13-3 overall. A Brazilian with heavy hands. This is a big guy that can throw those fists against another big guy that can knockout power in Ngannou, of course, a former UFC heavyweight champ. 38 years old, 17-3 in his career. Won his last 6 MMA fights, including over guys like Stipe Miocic and Cyril Gane. That Cyril Gane fight, we saw a different side of Ngannou. All of a sudden, he was a grappler, taking down Gane, throwing him to the mat, neutralizing his chance to use his athleticism against him. Do we see that again after coming off those back-to-back boxing losses? Does he use that ground game to try to, negate the length and the power of his opponent Ferreira? I don't know. The odds say he does. Minus 325 on DraftKings. Ferreira plus 260. I think it might even be shifting right now as we see there. Nope, still staying there. Minus 325. So he is a big favorite, over 3-1 against another champion, despite the long layoff. That's a tough one for me. That rust is something that always factors into MMA fights. When a guy's not there for a while, not drilling those things that he does day in and day out, especially when he goes off like Ngannou does, and not necessarily a different discipline in boxing, because obviously that's been his bread and butter for most of his career. Does he defend the takedown as well? Does he, have that chin locked in there after that Joshua knockout and those smaller gloves? Even training boxing used to be able to knock things away. You're not going to have that in MMA with the smaller gloves again, but still, I'm rolling with Ngannou here, the Predator. It's a big price to pay. You're going to have to find a better way to do it, of course, in the prop bets. Maybe by knockout with these two having power. I don't think it goes the distance, as it rarely does with heavyweights, unless he decides to use that wrestling as a big part of his offense. But Ferreira has had problems against upper-level opponents in his career at times, including that loss that was, changed. Well, one that became a no contest, of course, against Fabricio Verdum. So I'm going to roll with Ngannou, thinking that the upper level that he is just a little bit better against Ferreira, and that he gets the victory here. You also have a legend in Chris Cyborg fighting against Larissa Pacheco. Of course, Pacheco, the 30-year-old. It's amazing to think she's 30 when she's had 23-4. She's been around fighting for 12 years as a pro. She had time in the UFC. Of course, had those fights against Kayla Harrison, that trilogy. The first 2 did not go her way. Ends up getting the third before Harrison leaves the PFL. Has been on a 10-fight win streak the last few years since that. She has been the most dangerous woman in the PFL, but now she fights Chris Cyborg, the legend. Has fought everywhere. Has fought the UFC. Has fought Bellator. Has fought in the PFL. She, is on a 7-fight win streak in MMA. Has fought 4 boxing fights as well, where she has won all of them, 27-2, the 39-year-old. Pacheco is badass. When you look at that streak, you say, how can you not, pick her? But I think the odds have it wrong here. When you're going to give me value with someone of Chris Cyborg's pedigree, where she has beat almost everyone put in front of her that is not Amanda Nunes, that's her only MMA loss, is the Lioness. Pacheco's tough. She's been awesome. She has been dominating. She has not fought the likes of Chris Cyborg since she's fought, someone like Kayla Harrison, who, isn't even on the level of Cyborg yet. You got to get Cyborg, especially plus money. And these two are stand-up fighters. These two are brawlers. These two want to inflict as much damage on their opponent. I don't see it going the distance. So you maybe look for, something in the range of over-under, going under the under, depending on where it is. If it's under, like a 2.5, or if it's that doesn't go the distance, I think those are good bets. But if you're getting plus money against Cyborg, maybe just ride it out with that, because she is, of course, a legendary badass, one of the best women to have ever fought MMA, and continues to show that even at 39. You also have a rematch with the Bellator middleweight champion Johnny Eblen, pressure, fighting against the assassin Fabian Edwards. This is a rematch. These guys have fought before for Eblen's title. Didn't go in the favor of Edwards. There's a lot of, feeling out, calf kicks, and just kind of, showing, of course, a lot of respect for each other, not wanting to let the other guy do what he wanted to do. And eventually, even though Edwards did a great job with the takedowns in round 1 and 2 that Eblen tried to throw on him, eventually he gets caught. A big right hand drops him. Then Edwin just pounces on him and finishes him off in the third round. He is a heavy favorite once again. Edwards 13-3, the 31-year-old from England, going against Edwin, the 32-year-old, who's undefeated, 15-0, 10-0 in Bellator. Most of his wins by decision, both these guys. Of course, Edwin has a great wrestling background that he falls on a lot of times. Edwards did a good job to negate that, but we saw that's not the only way that he can fight. That's not the only way that Edwin can get his victories. Showed that power against Edwards. I think he gets the win again. Minus 625 early on. Now I think it's dropping to around minus 450 as we get ready for this fight. It might drop even more with people trying to take a shot on Edwards in the rematch. Of course, knowing the pedigree he comes from with his brother Leon Edwards, former the UFC champion. So, he is a guy that people are going to think can rebound and learn from that loss and come back. I just don't see it yet. You're going to have to show me that that you can be better than Edwin. He was very cautious in that fight, and I think he has to be more aggressive, but I think that plays right into what Edwin wants him to do. And also another great fight on that. The mercenary, AJ McKee against Big News Paul Hughes. Hughes, a tough Irish fighter, but he's stepping up in contests here against McKee. I like McKee in this fight. We're going to continue to talk about this fight and how to bet it, all these fights, when we talk to Ian Parker coming up here on the Combat Sports Report here on SportsGrid.
Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS.
A heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best two ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
If you're sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Ciano Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into the Combat Sports Report as we continue to look at this huge card out in Saudi Arabia this weekend for the PFL, the Battle of the Giants. And of course, here on SportsGrid, there's no better way to look at anything that we love than, of course, gambling on it, betting, making that money. And of course, Ian Parker, no one does it better than him. We bring him on the show right now. And Ian, appreciate your time as you get ready for this card. I'm sure it's busy, breaking down the angles, seeing what's going on down there, and finding out the best ways to price this out and make some money off this and break it down. But let's go through fight by fight. These main card, talk about how these fights are going to break down in your eyes and the ways that people can get involved with this, and maybe even see if there's some other little hidden gems you have here or there. But I mean, if you're going to watch this card, the thing that everyone's going to watch first and foremost and what they're watching for is this title fight at heavyweight, the return of Francis Ngannou. People have been waiting for a long time for this. Unfortunately, it did not look as good in boxing as we hoped. He looked great against Tyson Fury, just doesn't get the decision. Maybe kind of got robbed there a little bit, and then comes out against Anthony Joshua, and things just go wrong really quickly for him, making his return back to the MMA world where people have been thirsting for him to be. What do you see after the long layoff for him? What are you expecting for him and against this badass in Ferreira?
Well, look, when we're talking betting, right, you got to look at the odds of this fight, and I'm a little thrown off. I think they're a lot wider than they should be here. You know, you talk about Francis Ngannou with the inactivity in mixed martial arts, but with the heavyweight division, you don't always see the full landscape of the mixed martial arts, right? You don't always see the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, the scrambles, the exchanges you do with the lighter divisions. So I don't know if the inactivity is going to be really a problem for him. What concerns me, though, is what you mentioned, is that knockout to Anthony Joshua. That didn't happen too long ago, and Francis has never been rocked like that, and he was legitimately knocked out. He is now fighting someone who's younger, more athletic, bigger, maybe stronger, and it's a very tough fight for Francis here, but Francis does have other paths to victory. You know, when he fought Cyril Gane in his last UFC fight, he fought someone in Gane who was a very good kickboxer. So what did he do? He turned into a wrestler, and he won by grappling, control, and doing damage on the ground. If he was to do that here, that would be the least path to resistance, but I just don't see it happening. I feel like this fight's going to be on the feet. The first couple minutes going to be a little bit slow. They're both going to respect their power. But I'm going to go with the underdog here. I do think Ferreira, you know, he's had a little bit of a up and down earlier on with the PFL, but his last few fights, he's looked fantastic. If he can keep this fight on the feet with that reach, that power, that athleticism, I think we may see the underdog bark here. So I'm going to go with Renan Ferreira here at those odds. They're just too wide for me to not take a shot in a heavyweight fight where if someone hits that chin, they're going to the shadow realm. I'm going to go with the younger, more athletic fighter here.
Yeah, of course. You know, as we saw so long with Ngannou early in his career, was just if he gets the knockout or not. And if you can have a chin, you know, and that lasts, he's gonna have an issue of that change with the Gane fight. You know, I wonder when I was looking at this fight myself, like if, you know, looking back at the Verdun fight that Ferreira lost, you know, a while ago now for him, a couple of years, but still, can he employ that same strategy? But I just said the long layoff, the knockout to Joshua, we didn't know his chin, and also, you know, don't forget he also suffered a terrible tragedy with the loss of his son in between there since we've seen him. And so who knows where his head is going to be at, unfortunately. He says that's inspiring him to come back, but we'll see. That's a tough thing for anybody to deal with and keep that focus in a fight like this. Is there any other way? I mean, obviously, when you get that kind of juice, it's just easy to say, this is how I'm going to play it and stay away. Are there any other angles you like? You know, is there a round total? Is there a path to victory that you see that could, you know, give you even better odds in the prop market for this fight? Or are you just staying just straight up money line and, you know, not playing with it other ways?
Oh, I think if Ferreira's going to win, it's going to win by knockout. It'd be very hard to imagine him going all 5 rounds, winning a decision from bell to bell. So I would, you know, if the plus 260 doesn't wet your beak enough, take him by TKO or KO. You know, the under-over here, if it's an over-under 1.5, that one I would probably hold off on, because sometimes when you see these type of strikers at power, there's a feeling out period. You may see some calf kicks to try and slow one of them down, which all of a sudden, before you know, we're in the second round. But if the 2.5 round marker becomes the over-under, I would play the under there. But there's enough, you know, there's enough value on Ferreira by money line, by TKO. I don't even think we need to play the over-under here, especially because I think if Ngannou goes to the wrestling, this can go a little bit deeper than people expect. So we're hoping that this fight is the battle of the giants on the feet, not a battle of the giants on the mat, because that will get a little boring, but I'm expecting a knockout here.
Speaking of, you know, fights that we're expecting to be on the feet, and probably one that has that big age gap you talk about with Ngannou and Ferreira, of course, is that co-main event, the women's featherweight title, Cyborg against Pacheco, of course. Larissa has been on a tear right now, won 10 fights in a row, had those early struggles against Kayla Harrison, was shooting in the PFL, but then got her in that third fight and has just been tearing through people since in this organization, going against a legend in Cyborg, who not only is on a win streak in MMA, but is on win streak in boxing as well, you know, kind of going back and forth between fights. Do you think this one just stays on the feet? Are we looking for a knockout here as well? Or do we have to, you know, because of the women and sometimes how tough these two are, expect it to maybe end up in the hands of the judges and just see who does more damage to get the victory?
You know what? Depends which way you want to go here. I'm a little surprised the odds are where they're at, because I'm going to take Chris Cyborg with that underdog money. You know, Pacheco has, you know, after beating Kayla, she has looked good, but there have been fights where she's let up a little bit. Against Julia Budd, she did lose a round. She had to win that one by decision. Against Marina Maktakina, same thing. Neither one of those two women possessed the level of anything that Cyborg does. You know, where Pacheco has been strong is her physicality, her aggression, willing to take a punch to deliver that knockout one. Cyborg is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Cyborg is a Muay Thai specialist. So if Pacheco doesn't move that head out of the way, she may get knocked out here. I think the odds should be flipped. I think we're getting the value in Cyborg here. I do not think the age is a factor for her whatsoever. She has not looked like she's slowed down a beat in any of her competition in combat sports. So I'm going with the legend in Cyborg here. I think she gets it done.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I saw those odds, I was very surprised by them, of course. So it seemed like the book was baking in the age a little bit too much there. But, I mean, when you're as violent as Cyborg, you're not really taking the abuse that some of these people are taking at her age in this sport and how long she's been there. Obviously, she's been fighting for 19 years, but she's been the one hurting, not the one getting hurt. So it's something that I think we don't have to worry about the chin too much or anything like that. I love that play. I love getting that value on someone who is a legend like she is. But we're going to take a quick break because we have more to talk about. It's not just about those fights. We have a great, other parts of that card loaded. We have another champion on this card as well. We have some great fights coming down the line that people are going to tune in for, one even before you get to the pay-per-view. So stick with us here on SportsGrid on the Combat Sports Report. We're going to continue to talk to Ian Parker and find the best ways to bet this awesome card out in Saudi Arabia this weekend here on SportsGrid.
Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS.
A heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best two ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all season long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
I do a sliding DiVincenzo to the one. Obviously, Terrence Ciano Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into the Combat Sports Report here on SportsGrid. We continue to talk to Ian Parker about this great card out in Saudi Arabia, Battle of the Giants for the PFL. And of course, we talked about these top two fights, the main event, co-main event that everyone's excited about with some legendary fighters. But there are some other great fights on this as well that you got to pay attention to. Maybe some good areas to try to find different ways to bet it, especially with this next fight that we have coming up. Ian, you have Johnny Eblen versus Edwards. These guys fought already. This is a rematch. You talked earlier about maybe getting calf kicks to try to feel each other out. I feel like that's pretty much most of what we saw in this first fight between these guys. Besides, of course, you had Eblen going for the takedowns. Edwards did a good job defending those. So then all of a sudden, the third round, you get what you didn't really expect, which is Eblen getting some good power, knocking Edwards down, getting the finish. Do you see the rematch going any different? Do you see Edwards being any more aggressive? And what are some of the ways you're looking at this fight to make some money? Because there's a big gap here, minus 625 for Eblen, plus 455. So if you like Eblen, you obviously got to get into the weeds a little bit and find some props you like to make money.
Yeah, if you want to throw him in a parlay to get a little bit of better number, you can. I think he gets it done inside the distance here. I think we can look at a finish of a TKO, KO situation. I think the fight may go a little different where Eblen will do a better job disguising his wrestling and be able to use that striking to set it up as opposed to just one way or the other here. Fabian Edwards, he's a good fighter. I don't think he's a great fighter. I think he's a good fighter. The guys that he's fought since he fought Eblen, it's been quite a bit of a drop down that level of competition. So it's hard to really gauge where he is now compared to then. And with Eblen fighting Impa Kasaganai, having him fight through adversity, and then getting that win. So for me, if you're going to take Eblen here, either inside the distance or TKO or KO, I do think it's not going to go all 5 rounds. I think we've seen Eblen does possess that power. He just has to set it up better. And if he does it that way, then his wrestling becomes more dominant. So Eblen inside the distance is going to be the play for me.
As you saw in the graphic we put up, the odds are dropping a little bit, so they may be getting some action on Edwards, hoping for the upset, but still pretty big. So I agree with you. You got to find a different way, and finding that knockout or finding those other props is definitely the way to play that one, unless you're going for a big parlay, because that's even going to take a lot to offset that price there. But also on this, we have the mercenary AJ McKee versus Paul Hughes. Big news, Paul Hughes. This is pretty close on the odds, not too bad on this one. How do you feel about this one? Paul Hughes, he's a tough guy. He's on a nice win streak here. But AJ McKee, to me, is a guy who's fought some of the best. And this might be a step up in competition for Paul Hughes. Is he ready for it? Or, is this juice a little bit too much that he's getting?
This is crazy. When I heard this fight was coming out, I thought Antonio McKee Jr. was going to be minus 500. This is a guy, I think, regardless of organization, whether it's 155 or 145, he's a top, and I'm going to play it safe here, a top 10 guy. Easy in either division, doesn't matter what organization he's in. And this is not a knock on Hughes, right? Hughes was one of the top 2 prospects in the world this weight coming out of Cage Warriors. But man, you've watched the sport enough. There's such a difference between entering the PFL or Bellator or the UFC, starting off on the prelims and working your way up. He's jumping on the biggest pay-per-view in PFL history against one of the best guys in the world, arguably the number 2 at 155 in this weight class, and we're only getting minus 166 on McKee Jr. My money's on him all day, every day, twice on Sunday in this fight. I think this is going to be a very good learning lesson for Hughes. As long as he doesn't get finished, it's a win-win because he's expected to lose here. But those odds, that's crazy to me. McKee Jr. should be at least a 3-1 favorite.
Yeah, I was very surprised by that as well, like you. So, if people like him, it's probably when you have to jump on quickly before they start to get smart to their mistake there to make your money. Otherwise, you're going to be paying much more premium to get it. As we look at the rest of this card, some of these undercard fights, is there anybody that you have your eye on the undercard? Are there any underdogs that we haven't talked about that you think could be a good price for people to try to take a shot on? What else are you looking at throughout this card?
Yeah, the other one I'm really looking at is former Bellator champ Rafion Stotts. He's a very good fighter. He's fighting someone in Breno who is more of a striker here. I think Stotts really needs this win to get his confidence back and to get back to a title shot. So he's got to utilize that wrestling. Breno has been subbed out a couple times in his career. Stotts is like a minus 600 or 700, so not a lot of value on the money line or at all. I would take him to win by either submission or decision. If you want to really narrow it down, I think he gets it done by sub. So that's where we're going to go with the Rafion Stotts fight on the prelims.
Awesome. Ian Parker, thanks so much for joining us and breaking down these fights for us the way you see them. The best ways to make money for everybody watching on the Combat Sports Report. We appreciate your time. Keep up your great work, breaking down MMA, breaking down the PFL. We're looking forward to talking to you more and more as we get deeper and deeper into these fights and they continue on.
Sounds great, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, there's Ian Parker. Nobody better to break down the fight game and break down the best way to place your wagers as you get ready for this awesome pay-per-view coming up this weekend. PFL Battle of the Giants. Great talking to him. Looking forward to getting more betting analysis from him in the future.
Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS.
A heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best two ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
I do a sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Ciano Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into the Combat Sports Report here on SportsGrid. We're going to shift gears here a little bit right now. That's going to be an awesome card coming up this weekend over in Saudi Arabia. But let's look back and still stay over in the pond, this time over in Europe, where we're going to talk about what we just saw this past weekend with the BKFC, their first ever card in Spain, Marbella, Spain. First card on this new DAZN fight deal as well. So we got a little extra bells and whistles with the broadcast. Got to see them fight in a bullfighting ring, outdoor arena. Obviously, we've seen that somewhat with the BKFC already with fight cards in places like Sturgis, but completely different atmosphere when you're in this arena, this historic place in Marbella. And the show did not disappoint at all. Some great fights up and down that card. So why don't we break that down and talk about everything that we saw, and then later on we'll catch up with Dave, the Redneck Mundell, of course, the champion in the the middleweight division, who held on to his title. Great performance by him against Danny Christie. We'll touch on that in just a minute, but we'll talk to Dave coming up next and finish out the show talking to the champ and see how he is doing after that great fight and how he felt about Spain. And, of course, ask him how things are going down in Tampa, Florida, where he and Shift MMA are located. And, of course, there's been a lot of damage and horrible things happening with the hurricane. We'll see how he is held up and how the rest of Shift MMA is doing in the Tampa area in general. But as I said, let's talk about these fights that we just saw because we have a limited amount of time here, and there's just so much to say. First off, the top fight was, of course, that lightweight title fight between Franco Tenaglia and Tony Soto. Two guys that have been so exciting. Soto, we've been calling for a long time to get a lightweight title shot. Finally does. Not against the guy he expected in Palomino, but puts that 6-0 undefeated record up against Tenaglia's 3-0, who just came off a fight against Lights Out Lily with a great, impressive performance. Both these guys came in there, and both these guys did damage. We always thought coming in there that if it was going to be early, it'd be Tenaglia. If it was going to be late, it'd be Soto. It goes the distance, and it goes to the hands of Tenaglia, who wins by majority decision, 47-45 on two of the Georgia scorecards, 46-46, a draw on one of the scorecards. And that is because when you watch the fight, Tenaglia, first round drops Soto, gets that. Gets a 10-8 round before Soto drops Tenaglia in the second round. He gets a 10-8 round, so now we're even. Third round, Tenaglia drops Soto again to get the 10-8 there, to finally get the 2-point advantage that you see there in the scorecards. And then, of course, Soto comes on strong late, as we expected. But the knockdown in the third round to give him that one-up on Soto was huge when you get to the scoring. And it was just an incredible fight. Both these guys gave it their all. Both these guys pushed so hard. You could see it on their faces. You saw it in the highlight. These guys still at the fourth and fifth round just swinging, doing everything they could to try to put themselves over the top. Just two all-out badasses just trying to get the edge on the other one. They had so much respect for each other. And so much respect from the guys in charge, as we saw with Dave Feldman and, of course, Conor McGregor in there in the squared circle afterwards talking to them, where they got a special surprise about their pay from the new part owner, Conor McGregor, when he gets in there and tells them that not only are they getting a bonus, they're going to get a lot more on top of that.
To the other people that fought on this card. But what we're going to do for these two gentlemen, as well as a bonus, is double the purse. They're getting double pay. That's it straight. Well done, gentlemen. You are getting double pay and bonuses. Thank you for your service.
Absolute warriors, guys. Thank you.
There you go. It's always nice to get, a little extra bonus, but double the pay. That's probably even a much bigger, check for both those guys. And I'm sure, when you're coming in there, you go through a fight like that, you're thinking, all right, I'll get a little extra on top. No, they got a lot more on top. And they deserved it from the fight that they put on for the fans. That's everything that they'd hoped for when they put this fight together, I'm sure, with Dave Feldman and Nate Shook. And those guys wore it on their faces, and now they wear it in their wallets. Good on them. Even Soto losing that fight, you cannot, take that away from you. You cannot make it, a bad thing on his mark. I think no matter how you ended up in that fight, you came out great. Of course, Tanaka comes out a little better now that he is the champion. The BKFC lightweight division. We'll see what happens next now with that division. Does he now fight Palomino, who was the champ and never officially lost it, was stripped of it? I don't know. That would be an interesting fight. A lot of power there versus a lot of speed in Palomino, though Palomino would be a lot older. So we'll see how that one goes. But that was an awesome fight. Everything you could have hoped for when they put it together. Great performance in defending his title goes to Austin Trout, the welterweight king, who defended his title against Rico Franco. Franco was 3-0 coming in here with his big win, of course, off Caleb Harris in Newcastle last June. Trout took that belt from Palomino, made him not double champ, but single champ, before he then eventually lost the lightweight title. Took that welterweight crown from him in February. This was his first time defending it, and he looked great. Unanimous decision, 50-43. Knocked down Franco in the first and fourth rounds. Just showed the kind of acumen and skill that he has. You see the head movement there, the great defensive movement. I mean, he was always a great defensive fighter in boxing, but it's always different when you take those gloves off. Can you, now not deflect those punches, but just get out of the way completely? He showed he could. He dominated for 5 rounds. As tough as Franco was, he just was showing that he is not on the level of this all-time boxer. In, of course, Austin, no doubt, Trout, who continues to hold that title and gave impassioned speech afterwards about how he wants to, represent the BKFC. He's talked before about how he wants to be on basically the Mount Rushmore of BKFC, and he's working his way towards that with these performances now as the title holder. And where does that division go now? There's a number of guys with their hands out looking for a title shot, I'm sure. A guy like Trinidad Snake, who's atop those rankings, I'm sure would love to get in there. We'll see if he's next up or if there's someone else in line, or when we see Austin Trout again, because I don't think he took too much damage in that fight. Well, obviously it all comes out later on, of course, with bare knuckle. You get a little bit more the next day and the day after about how those hands feel, but hopefully we can see him again soon, defending that title and continuing to show how good he is in the welterweight division. But he said he's here to stay. He's not a guy who's just going to win that title, defend it, and say, okay, now I'm going back to glove boxing where I was before. He wants to continue to be a champion in the BKFC and shows why the way he performed against Rico Franco. Also, middleweight title fight. You had Dave Mundell versus Danny Christie. One where Mundell, we've been waiting for a while from the fight. We've been hoping it was going to be against Perry. That never came to fruition. Perry always had other things in mind. And then, of course, Mundell then had a fight against King Mo that was taken off and switched to this one in Spain against Danny Christie. Christie, a guy who held the light heavyweight title in the UK, despite losing to Mundell's teammate, of course, Jared Warren, Captain Deadpool. Then he drops down to 185, has a fight there, looks great, but then goes against the guy who shows that he is that upper echelon in this division right now, and that is the redneck Dave Mundell. You see there, he drops him multiple times in this fight, stopped 55 seconds into round 1. He drops him 3 times, 1 in the first, 2 in the second, and he gets the TKO victory against a former champion in the UK, just showing that he is one of the best, if not the best. He is the pound-for-pound king right now in the BKFC and is still the champion in this, of course, middleweight division. We'll talk to Dave Mundell coming up next, find out how he felt about Spain, how he felt about the fight, and why it took so long to get him in there. Was it, guys ducking him, or things falling apart? We'll find out from the redneck himself coming up next on the show. Also, great fights there in welterweight. You had a big upset with Maia. Felipe da Silva Maia going against James Lights Out Lilly. We said, this is a big one for Lilly. Came in 3-0 in the BKFC, then lost back-to-back fights. One to Palomino for the belt, the other one to Tenaglia for the chance to fight for the belt. So, obviously, 2 upper echelon opponents. Maia, on the other hand, was only 1-1 in the BKFC Europe. He came off a loss to Petkov. He's a former BJJ fighter, so not, necessarily a stand-up guy, but has, of course, transitioned to that. But can Lilly reestablish himself as a tough, one of the tough guys in this division? He did not. 68 seconds into the first round, Maia gets the TKO win over Lilly off the one knockdown that he got in that fight that you see there. Lilly could not continue. That is the end of that fight. and Maia gets the victory in upset form. So who knows what is next for James Lights Out Lilly. He, of course, is an awesome fighter, a great guy. He's been great for the BKFC, but now 3 losses in a row. He might have to fight his way back up from, farther down the mountain than you might have thought he would be before. Also, some fights that we highlighted last week that we saw, the debuts of, former glove boxers who look to make big impressions in Spain. Of course, Dan Chapman against Mike Jurek. Dan Chapman does do that. He has a great fight there. 88-second TKO victory for him with 3 knockdowns. He proves that he can be one of the best, one of the most dangerous in this division. We'll see what happens with him next, if he comes over and fights in the U.S. or if he continues to fight over there for the UK BKFC promotion. And then Hannah Rankin, she gets the win, although a lot of people didn't feel like it was as impressive. She gets a split decision, 49-46 on 2 cards, 47-48 on the other against Deborah Melhorn. She came in there with a lot of fanfare, a lot of pop. Doesn't get the knockout victory, has to go all 5 and just squeaks by. So we'll see if she can improve upon that in the future. But she does get the victory, at least in her first for the BKFC. When we come back, talking to the Redneck, Dave Mundell, here on the Combat Sports Report.
Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS.
A heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best 2 ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
I do a sliding DiVincenzo to the 1. Obviously, Terrence Ciano Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back in the Combat Sports Report on SportsGrid, and now we continue to talk about this great card they had out in Marbella, Spain. First time in Spain for the BKFC, and it certainly was quite the show that they put on there. The first fight card with their new partners, DAZN. Everything seemed to go perfectly for them, and everything seemed to go perfectly for the next man we're going to bring on, the Redneck, Dave Mundell, of course, retaining his championship belt with the BKFC. A great fight in Spain. Dave, thanks so much for joining us. Before we get into the fight and everything around it, first, I want to say that our best wishes are with everybody in the Florida area, especially in Tampa. I know, all you guys were dealing with those hurricanes, those terrible hurricanes that came through the last couple of weeks. How have things been for you and the rest of the Shift MMA team, as well as the gym itself?
The hurricanes that came through, they definitely did a number. I got some teammates that lost pretty much everything, and just the whole area is in. It's picking up a little bit now, but it was chaos for a little while. Couldn't get gas, couldn't get certain groceries, stuff like that, and people definitely weren't prepared. And hopefully that changes for the next one.
Hopefully we don't have more like we have had. But I know recently, especially that Tampa Big Bend area has gotten hit pretty hard these last couple of years, which you guys aren't used to. It's not usually Miami, South Florida getting nailed with these things. It's not usually making the turns that they do. But hopefully, we can help all those who need it and rebuild and be better for next time. I know Jared Warren, your teammate was one of those guys I think who had a lot of issues from the hurricane. I saw different GoFundMe's for him and Crystal Pittman, and hopefully we can help all recover. Know that Dave Feldman is trying to do a part in that as well. I saw him starting the GoFundMe where that he'll match up to $20,000. I don't know where that stands now, but hopefully we can get some of that aid to a lot of the fighters and people down there and help out as much as we can the BKFC family as well as the Florida area, at large. So our best wishes are with everybody, and hopefully we can start to repair things. But you, of course, had a big weekend out there in Spain. It's been a while since we saw you, almost a year, because of course you'll be chasing one man down that doesn't seem to want to fight you, and we'll talk about that later on. But how has it been for you going through this, this long layoff that you've had? I know you're a guy who wants to get in there. You want to fight. You don't want to, have this time off. What was it like for you having this long layoff? How did you stay fresh? What were the things you were doing to, really kind of pass the time as you waited for someone to finally step up and want to fight you?
I pretty much stay in the gym regardless of whether or not I'm in camp anyways. But I did get, I guess we'll call it teased a little bit, throughout the whole 11 months I was supposed to fight. So I feel like I've been in an 11-month camp. Silver lining to that is it made me that much better. I mean, as everyone's seen, I came out and I probably had one of my best performances yet. And it'll continue to grow, but it is what it is, and I just hope that I get back in there sooner this time.
We're hoping so as well. What were, if you could talk about some of them? I know we had the King Mo fight that was supposed to happen that fell through that, we'll talk about in a second, but what were some of the other ones that you're talking about that might have been teased, or, were there a bunch of fights that kind of were put out there and pulled away? What was the situation that you were facing as you were sitting there waiting for something to come through?
Yeah, it's a little bit of trying to find somebody who actually is deserving of the title shot. I mean, there's plenty of guys that are calling me out, but they have like 3 fights. I'm now on my 10th, so it's just hard to match make for this scenario. So outside of getting like some bigger names, some people who got some pull, it's just tough. And then the more teasing part wasn't so much opponents as it was locations. And things just got kind of bounced around. BKFC's making moves. They're growing, and things just play out the way they do. But at the end of the day, everything came together perfectly, and we shined, and we're growing. So we just going to keep on riding the wave, and I'm happy as can be.
You certainly did shine. You're supposed to fight King Mo down there in Florida in your home area. Down in I believe it was Hollywood. That fight was supposed to happen. That one fell through. What was the reason for the switch between King Mo? I think I saw him post something about after your fight that he's going to stay retired. Was it that he decided not to come back and fight? And then, how did the change happen, just a couple of weeks between King Mo to Danny Christie for this title?
I really can't talk on what I don't know. And nothing was disclosed to us. I just knew that we were supposed to fight. And believe it or not, I was always under the impression that me and King Mo were fighting, but in Spain. We had knew about the location and date already. And then when they finally announced our fight, it was going to be in Miami. So it was kind of like upset me a little bit, but at least I'd be home, be able to fight in front of all my people. And I still was going to make a good paycheck. So I was like, okay, that's fine. And then he pulled out, and then I was go right back to the emotions, like, who am I going to fight now? Then Christy popped up, and we're back in Spain. And like I said, everything happens for a reason. So at the end of the day, everything worked out. So I can't complain. And like I said, though, I just really need to get back in there as soon as possible this time.
And we need to see you as soon as possible after the performance. I mean, you've always put on great performances, but the one you put on against Christie, I mean, this was a tough guy. We said coming in on this show that, just like you, was a guy who fought at a higher weight class, had a lot of success, and then still decided, you know what, I feel better at the lower weight class, dropped down, had a great fight in England. This is his second fight at this weight class. Coming in there, former title holder, trying to take your belt. What was it that you expected from him? And, what did things go the way you kind of planned and your work before the fight at Shift? Or was there something, did your power even impress you the way you dropped him those couple of times in that fight?
I 100% expect the fight to go exactly how it did. And what I mean by that is I'm very confident in myself, the amount of work that I put in, what I'm capable of. One of the biggest things that I pride myself on is my fight IQ, and I understand what people are looking for. I have great eyes. I can make defensive movements on a fly, and I can counter right off of them. So I knew that going into the fight that whenever he decided to push, that I was going to be able to connect clean and set him down. I just wasn't sure if he was going to come out of the gate trying to get me out of there, or if he was going to try to box me. And for the first round, he kind of was on his back foot a little bit, and then the second round, he tried to engage a little bit, and I was just already coming forward so hard. So it went exactly how we had planned, and it was just a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful when a plan comes together like that. A great performance by you against a very tough tough opponent there. A guy who, like we said, was a former champion over in the UK. Of course, you had that little insight, of course, with him fighting Jared Warren when he had that title. But we're going to take a quick break and come back and wrap up this show with our man, the Redneck Dave Mundell, here on SportsGrid on the Combat Sports Report.
Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS.
A heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best two ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all strong, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
I do a sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Ciano Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
We conquered. Now we move on to the next big stage. I've been calling for Perry for a minute now. That's the fight that I want. It's the fight I deserve. You guys heard it from Connor. He wants it too. So I got some chances of making some but now. And they ain't gonna give me that bum that I want some big names from the UFC or something. What's up?
That is Dave, the Redneck Mundell, right there after his win over Danny Christie to retain his title over in Marbella, Spain. And as we heard, you call out Mike Perry, who you've called out over and over again every time you've gotten in front of a mic over the last year. Mike Perry has been the name that you have put out there. Obviously, when looking at the rankings, he makes the most sense as the number one contender in that division, a guy who likes to run his mouth, so he definitely thinks he's the best. He has that King of Violence belt, and you want to take that from him. We've been waiting for a while. You've been waiting for a while, probably even longer than us. What are the chances do you think that actually happens? Do you think Connor's desire for it now, with him being part of the ownership, can push that, or with their strained relationship given what happened after his boxing match? Do you think it's just not going to, it's going to cause even more problems with it? What are you seeing from behind the scenes here, trying to get this Perry fight that you've been looking for a long time?
At the end of the day, it was always going to happen eventually. I feel like the promotion was just trying to build my name a little bit. But definitely with Conor, speaking on my behalf for it, me asking him personally, him telling me yes, he's going to push for it. And somebody with the name that he has is going to make that happen. And I can't wait. And going back to something, I don't care about that belt of King of Violence crap. I'm the world champ. I got the real belt. He needs to come see me for that. If he doesn't want to, because he was in the comments, said something about he wanted an 85, I'll smoke him there too. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. But he can keep that little lame-ass belt.
Well, hopefully that comes to fruition. I know we've been calling for it on SportsGrid for a long time. It seems like it's been made to happen. It just hasn't happened for whatever reason. Obviously, he has wherever he is in mind-wise, what he wants to fight, who he wants to fight. But there is no denying that you are the best in that division right now. So if he wants that title, he's got to come through you for it. Obviously, as we said, it's been a trouble getting that going, even though you've wanted it, even though you've called for it. And as you mentioned earlier in the interview, there's plenty of other guys who have opened their mouths saying they want your chance of your title, but maybe aren't ready for that. A guy like, I know Donald Sanchez, number 3 in the rankings, only has a couple of fights. He's been very vocal about wanting you. If you can't have the Perry fight, you mentioned former UFC guys or other big names. Is there anybody else you have in mind to try to make happen, or is it just you're completely focused on Perry, and until that happens or they come to you with something else, that's all you're focused on?
It's not that I'm completely focused on him. He's just the only one that's in the organization that makes sense. Outside of him, I don't have any names. I don't really care. I'm down to fight whoever, whenever, whatever the promotion says they want, I'll give it to them. Somebody like Donald Sanchez, I think is an easy check for me, but it does nothing to build my name. But if the promotion wants me to go in there and starch him real quick, send me the contract. I'll sign it right now. Outside of that, it's just something that I feel that I really deserve is all the hype behind Mike, and I just want to show people that he isn't it. He can't box. He's just tough, and that's it. But I'm tough. I'm experienced. I'm very skilled. My fight IQ is above anybody in this sport right now, and I'm just ready to shine.
I mean, he's had some great wins, but of course, some of them, like Alvarez, have been guys lower weight classes or inexperienced in the BKFC. So, and definitely hasn't fought anybody on your level yet. Hopefully, we can put that together to see who is the best in that division for sure. Speaking of Spain, obviously it was a great time in the ring, but how did you feel outside the ring? It looked like, the setup looked like it was awesome. Looked like the fans were enjoying it. Saw pictures of you kind of hanging out in Spain a couple of days before. It looked like you were enjoying it, meeting the people. Were you surprised at how recognized you were getting on the streets and the love you were getting before the fight?
Yeah, Spain was amazing. Let's start off with just the food alone. Like, it was so clean. The first day, eating the same exact thing I eat here at home, but eating it there, I dropped 3 pounds in one day, just cutting out all the preservatives and crap they have in our food. The people were beautiful. Everybody over there is fit. They all eat right, and they're all living their dream. The atmosphere, walking around, everyone seeing me, recognizing me, wanting pictures, my face plastered everywhere. I'm going into these really well-known gyms, and they're all excited that I came. All the mom and pop places that I went and visited just wanted to feed me all the most delicious food. I had to turn down some of it in the beginning, but towards the end I was able to mow down on it, and it was a great time. Great time.
Yeah, I could eat paella for days, so I'm sure it was incredible over there. Dave Mundell, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on defending your title once again. Hopefully, as you said, we see you back in there again soon. It's been too long. The great performance you put on, we need to see repeated again soon. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Combat Sports Report. That was the Redneck, Dave Mundell, your champion in the BKFC. Once again, retaining that title with an incredible performance over Danny Christie. Just starching, as he said, a guy who used to hold the belt in the UK, making quick work of him. Great job by him. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Combat Sports Report. We'll see you again next week here on SportsGrid.